Welcome back. Every week we pause and reflect because capital campaigns, especially in small towns, aren't just about buildings or budgets. They're about people choosing to be generous. This podcast explores the beautiful space where generosity occurs through ancient and modern writings from all cultures and religions, seeking deeper wisdom for capital campaign work in small towns. Whether or not you are just starting out or you're deep in the middle of a campaign, these 5-minute reflections will ground you, encourage you, and remind you why this work matters. Today is our 4th episode in our series on authentic giving and avoiding transactional approaches. We've discussed various different approaches, and when a donor demands transactional approach, and the root of loneliness in transactional donations. Another root for transactional donations is guilt. Capital campaign donors can be guilted into a donation, either by the campaign messages or through the donor's inner values. What happens when a campaign relies too heavily on guilt? This week, I am reading 2 quotes, one modern, one ancient. The first is from a research article, A Theory of Guilt Appeals, a review showing the importance of investigating cognitive processes as mediators between emotion and behavior, by Grattan and Malaise, published in 2019. Quote, "Guilt appeals in the field of persuasion are quite common. However, the effectiveness of these messages is sometimes ambivalent. It is widely acknowledged that guilt leads people to engage into pro-social behaviors, but the effects of guilt can also be counterproductive. It therefore seems that guilt does not act as a universal trigger for restorative actions, for example, giving. As an illustration, Granton and colleagues showed that guilt induction led to pro-social behavior, such as giving, when persuasion messages contained subtle reparation proposals. When the message was presented in a blatant or overtly explicit way, guilt led to reactance-like behaviors, that is, opposed to the persuasive message request, showing that guilt by itself is not sufficient to trigger altruistic behaviors. Paradoxically, the authors show that explicit instructions, for example, "It is necessary to mobilize to save the planet," provoked backlash behaviors. To summarize, too much guilt, and the donor will react in fear and a refusal to give. Now let's visit some wisdom from the 6th century BC from the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. Quote, "Be careful what you water your dreams with. Water them with worry and fear, and you will produce weeds that choke life from your dream. Water them with optimism and solutions, and you will cultivate success. Always be on the lookout for ways to turn a problem into an opportunity for success. Always be on the lookout for ways to nurture your dream." Unquote. As we are building our case for support for the capital campaign, we are making intentional choices in the framing of the message and the images we use. We can choose overtly guilt-inducing messages and images to pressure the donors to give, such as crying clients or a building falling down. These messages and images, coupled with an urgent call to action such as, "You must give now," will provoke backlash. Instead, when we choose messages and images that show need, empower agency, and provide the opportunity to give as a part of the solution, the donor can take any guilt that they may feel and channel it into a positive gift. That is, we are watering authentic generosity. Let's reflect on one question this week. With what are you watering the messages to donors? With guilt or authentic giving? Share this podcast if you enjoy these 5-minute reflections and subscribe to receive these reflections released every week. To explore small town capital campaign coaching deeper, visit servingnonprofits.com. See you next week.